Welcome to Control Room Conversations, a podcast that goes behind the scenes of live events to meet the people who make them happen. Welcome to Control Room Conversations. This week, my guest is Tom Wadsworth. He is one of the best replay operators I've ever run into. He's a very humble man, lots of experience, lots of positive energy. I can't really say too many good things about this guy.
Thank you, John, for having me. It's a pleasure. Always nice working with you. Love our control room conversations, pre and post game, and excited to talk a little shop, excited to talk a little ball. Let's go.
Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about who you are? Tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what's going on with you and your life a little bit. Just to talk about maybe Replay Row, maybe about all the other things. Just start kicking it off.
My name is Tom Wadsworth, and I have been a freelance replay operator since 2016. Um, I work all over the Los Angeles area. I work at Crypto.com Arena, SoFi Stadium, the Intuit Dome, um, and my buddy Logan and I, we have a fledgling, Instagram page called Replay Row, where we kind of break down replay sequences and broadcast stuff. And, that just kind of spawned from the idea of, well, we're in a text chat all the time. Hey, did you see that cool replay? Hey, did you see that graphics for, that graphics mistake or, whatever that's pertinent to broadcasting. We just decided, what if we started making a little bit of content, see if people like it. And so far, we've gotten pretty good feedback. And so if you're on Instagram at Replay Row, and if you want to talk a little shop, we're there for you.
Right, and that's mostly what I've seen is mostly sports content. It's mostly sports replays and things of that nature. But
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, talking when you talk about replay, when you think of replay in a broadcast sense, oftentimes um, it's concurrent. It goes with sports, right? Oh, I want to see that catch, or I want to see, that I want to see if the foot was in bounds. I want to see if the toe was on the line, and that's where replay in the broadcast world has been so integral, such an important part of a sports broadcast. And, for me, continuing on my background, I went to Cal State Long Beach. I got a degree in communications. I had no idea what I wanted to do post graduation. Luckily, I got an internship with ESPN, and this is great. I'm around sports. I want to be in sports. And I learned literally my first day how to cable wrangle. And, you know, now fast forward 10 years later, here we are. And, I think there's other positions within broadcasting, within production, that can translate to like other areas, right? Like audio's universal, camera's universal, director, technical directors. But I think with replay, if you're a sports minded person, um, it's a really fun job. It's a really cool job. And I'm so thankful to be just a very small, to be a small part of the LA sports ecosystem for sure.
yeah, and I definitely think it's one of those things that like where for replay specifically what you do and who you are, what you bring to the table. Like you have a sports memory like almost nobody else. You're able to remember all
Thank you.
where everybody's from, what schools they came up in, the mascots. It's a fun little thing. It's fun just having you in the room. It's fun just listening to you just chat. So
Thank you.
it's you
Thank
know,
you.
and it's informative and it brings something to the broadcast too, because there's moments where you're like, oh well, this guy was with this guy they came up together or anything like that, and that's definitely a big deal. So now that we talked about the replay part, let's talk about the row part. And like for me, one of the things that I noticed at one point in time, and it was at NFL Network, I walked into their room where they had like I think eight or more control rooms going at the same time,
Yeah, that sounds right. Yep.
and everybody there was working in unison. So somebody was like, "Oh, hey, I need this guy's catch from 2 days ago," and the guy over here is like, "I got it clipped off. Send it to him." And I was just like, "That's just a wonderful level of camaraderie." And like you said, you end up in a group chat where you're talking about everything that's going on. You know, why don't you talk about the row and that sort of thing, that part of the whole thing?
So replay row um, is a term that was coined by one of my closest friends and mentors, Logan Bierman. And replay row originated at SoFi Stadium when the building opened. Um, and when you work on big broadcasts, there's a team of replay ops, and usually, the replay ops are in a row. And Logan, just a replay row. This is replay row, and there's a good core of us. There's probably a good 10, 11 people that work in that row that work replay at SoFi, and it's a really special group, and it's a group of friends and mentors that are just so important to me, and helping with personally um my career advancement and and friendships, and it's just wonderful. And there's so many people in replay row with so many diverse backgrounds, which I think, is not just important for broadcasting, but it's important in life. I think getting people and having people work together from, different parts of the world, that are a little bit different than you, but you can come together and make something special happen. And I just love those guys. And you know, we Logan Bierman, great guy, Ken Fisher, Francisco Castillo, Luis, KCP, Bobby Watson, Andre Etchison, all those guys are just so, you know, helpful and important. And, I think when we started at that stadium, we're all pretty similar in age, right? And, I think having that as well, like being close in age and similar life, like we all started when we were kind of in our late 20s, early 30s, and now, guys have kids and getting married, and it's just really fun group to be a part of, and so thankful. And let's go replay row, go Rams, go Chargers.
So another thing that I see that happens a lot in that setting is you guys will really work together to like divide up the work and talk about like who's getting what, who's paying attention at what point in time, and that sort of coordination. And like especially like it when I've seen you like either by yourself or with somebody else, it does get a little overwhelming because you have to like pay attention to everything, and then you're also like clipping off clips for future or for the actual broadcast, or even for like a relay highlight replay highlight reel or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that I also see about you is that you tend to talk about the process. You tend to push the envelope, and you also tend to give credit to people where you learned a trick or talk about, you know, I want to try this thing or I want to do this thing. And, it's one of those things where it's like a growing and learning experience. But I think it's just a lot of like the way that I see that camaraderie work, the way that you bring like a level of expertise on sport. I think those are things that really make you stand out in that role.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you saying that. And, I think, with Replay Row and with our group, you've been around and I've been around a little bit, and, we know what it's like to be on, truck broadcasts and national broadcasts where, you might have some, older directors that, have a certain way of doing things and, running into a few people where you're like, man, like it's intimidating, right? When you're young and you're coming up in the broadcast industry, it's hard, excuse me, it's hard not to feel intimidated and, sheepish and a little scared, to ask for help. And, I think with Replay Row, with our group, we're making it a point, like, if you have a question, if you don't know how to do something, like, don't hesitate to ask, right? And I think, there's strength in numbers and there's strength, in having like such a good group of people to lean on. And I think in this industry, the more mentors you can have and the more people you can rely on and trust, the better off you're going to be, and that goes into like, you know, having a great attitude, being friendly, being supportive, and yeah, I definitely think, having that attitude is almost more important. Having those soft skills is almost more important than almost the tangible skills. How well you get along with people is a big part of the job.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've talked about, especially on this podcast, is it's a collaboration. We're all working together, we're all creating together. It's something that I love about the thing is that it's not one person trying to make everything work. It's one of those things where literally, like, if I'm directing a show and you're doing replay, I'm trusting that you got the best shot. You're
Sure.
telling me the best shot that I possibly could have. There might be a little bit of communication occasionally, but it's getting each other's back, having that
Yeah.
good positive attitude that you bring all the time, keeping things light, keeping things fun. Um, One of the ladies that we work with, she basically says everybody should be having fun here. Everybody, including the
Hmm.
people who are working here, we're all doing a really fun, entertaining thing, and we should all just be having fun all the time. And it does have some of those harder moments where people have a different attitude and they're wanting things done a very specific way and narrow-minded and pushing things forward. And those are things that are a little harder to deal with sometimes, like you said, especially when you're young, especially when you're
Yeah.
just
When
coming
you're
up.
Yeah, when you're still learning and you don't quite know, what the social cues are and, when to ask questions or when to speak up. And yeah, and again, that just goes back to like, Replay Row as a group, as, not only are we, you know, we work well together and we do good work and we do a great job, but, we're also friends, and hang out outside of work. And again, like, keeping it light, like you said, and at the end of the day, like, it's just entertainment, right? We're not at a doctor's office, we're not, a first responder. Like, this is just video, right? It's video, it's camera, it's fun, and I think remembering that, in times where it can get a little bit of fast paced and it can be a little, the broadcast can go off the rails a little bit. It's just an important reminder, like, we're having fun. It's cool, and again, like, personally, sometimes, I'll say, oh yeah, I'm the vibes guy. I'll bring the vibes guy, and I think, you know, my sports background, playing high level, AAU basketball in high school and being an active person, gosh, I want to say it might have been Bill Walsh. Um, he has some quote that's like, you can't perform your best when you're uptight, when you're stressed, when you're on edge, when you have anxiety. Athletes perform their best when they're loose, they're feeling good, they're mentally sound. And I think the same thing can be said during a broadcast. And if everyone's kind of uptight and not knowing what to do and scared to ask questions. The more you can simplify something, I think the better off, you'll be, and when you have that clear head and it's okay, giving yourself some grace. Um, that makes for a better broadcast. It makes you a better operator. It makes you a better broadcaster. when you kind of keep things, at a healthy, light. You want to take it serious, but in the same breath, like take a deep breath, relax a little, everything will be okay.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things that if you are in like a more of a Zen state, you're going to have a better time. You're going to be
Hmm.
able to maneuver, and you're also going to be able to be adaptable, a little bit more malleable as well to just anything that's going on. And it's definitely one of those things that when times get tight, when times are a little bit more scary, if everyone's a little loose, or at least a few people are, then they're able to be like, okay, I can adapt to this. I can, I can carry the weight while somebody else is doing something. Haven't been doing as much at this moment, so I can totally step in. But um, it's also like the opposite, where if it is really tight, if it is really tense, if one mistake happens, it tends to domino, and there's multiple mistakes that tend to happen, and that's when things start getting a little hectic and a little more hairy, and a little bit more people are worried about their jobs and etc. Um, but keeping that nice light attitude, I think, is more of a newer concept than it has been. And I still run into some people who are a little bit more hard edge about this is how it needs to be. This is exactly what we need. And just opening it up to more just like freedom to move, freedom to breathe, freedom to add whatever comes along. Because that's part of replay too, is because you might not be getting the big moment, but you might be like, oh hey, there's this weird thing that happened over here. You know, and that's one of the things that's really important for you is also like the focus that you bring to doing the replays, is that you're not just queuing up when somebody says, oh, there's a foul. You don't just back up the thing 30 seconds to the foul. You're watching and you tend to know exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, th exactly. And, I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, you know, like, my personal broadcast career journey. I didn't know that I was gonna be a broadcaster. I didn't really understand, you know, that I was gonna be a full-time freelance replay op. And because I was playing sports in high school and really focusing on that, trying to play at the next level. But, I kind of understood that wasn't really going to work out. And it's like, how can I be involved, right? How can I still be involved? And how can I utilize my sports knowledge, my sports background into a career? And I think doing replay, is the job for that. And again, like, I think having like a good baseline knowledge of all sports when you're a replay op is imperative. You might not be like, at least for me coming up, my first couple years, I might not have been the most technically sound replay op, which might scare some producers that are listening to this, but I promise you now, I'm good to go. But like, okay, if there's a foul, if there's a crazy foul that happens, I know exactly what to look for because I played the sport, right? If you know the rules of football, there's a million rules in American football: encroachment, offsides, false start. And if you know those things and something happens, you know exactly what input to go to, what camera to go to, what replay to show. And again, just having that kind of baseline knowledge um, is so helpful as a replay op.
Oh, definitely. And that's one of the things that, for me, growing up in the Midwest and being exposed to like a whole bunch of different sports and sports culture helps me immensely. Like, I think I remember showing up for a volleyball thing and going, oh, I don't know terribly too many of the rules. And then all of a sudden I'm just like, oh, I'm remembering all these rules from a million years ago versus like water polo, which was something I always wanted to do, but I didn't ever do it anywhere close to the actual professional level or whatever. So I spent, some of my own time before going in just studying the rules so I could understand what was going on, so that I could hopefully be able to tell the story of what's going on a little bit better than just going by what somebody's telling me to do, or what shots that happen to be there, instead of being like, oh, we need this person over here, or this is that key moment. And it's interesting whenever you're doing something that's non-standard as well because it's not your normal. So, but like you said, those backgrounds that you have really do shine through. They really do make it so that you're very instantly able to like even help the producers on a level that I tend to think you almost should have a producer for your replay section, which I know some of the places you do. And I think that's really telling for how important everything you're doing is. Also, there's the fact that you tend to also impact the game by showing a specific replay, and that's like a major deal. And it's one of those things where these big time athletes are literally looking at your replay. The coaches, the refs, everyone's looking at your replay because it's the first one they see. And you guys change the course of the game. You bring the truth to light, basically. And why don't you talk about that for a moment as well?
Yeah, so um, when there's definitely a difference from when you do replay on a national level or a like a truck level versus doing in-house replay. And they're both the same. They both use, the same machines, but the job itself is a little different, right? And when you do in-house replay, the main job is to assist the coaches in regards to challenges, specifically in the NFL and the NBA. You when you do in-house replay, you want to show the best possible look at all times. And it's when you kind of think about it, it's easy to get lost in your head like, man, you know, Coach McVay and Coach Harbaugh are just looking at our replay, looking at our work all the time. I hope the roll was good. I hope the angle was good. But, at the end of the day, you've done it a million times and it gets easier, each game you do. And, there's definitely been some moments in my career where, oh, I could have shown the better look, or I should have went to, camera 2 instead of showing camera 7 or whatever it is. But, oftentimes again, you know, there's a missed foul somewhere and it's like, nope, and you throw the right replay up, and whenever you get the JJ Redick going like this, or Ty Lue, or the football coaches throw the red challenge flag, it's such a good feeling. It's such a endorphin inducing positive feeling. And yeah, we might help the game, we might help the team in a very small way, but um yeah, it is fun. And um I think again, like another key difference, right, is when you're doing in-house replay, you're working for one specific team, right? So you're always showing highlights and replays that can help or impact the home team in a positive way. Whereas when you work on a truck, when you work on like a national broadcast, it's a little bit different where you're typically just showing highlights and cool plays. You're doing a lot more rollouts. So again, the jobs are similar, but but also, very different as well.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like you guys really make those things happen, and you really bring them to the forefront. But let's talk about what's in your future. What do you see for yourself?
Gosh, my future, John, I'm trying. I don't even know what I'm doing next week. Nah, nah. That's a good question. I think with our Replay Road channel, Logan Bierman and myself, we're still putting out some good educational videos. We've gotten a lot of good feedback. So I think, maybe my next step personally is to get more into, editing, maybe try to, get more into the editing field because, being a replay op is very conducive to being a live editor. So, I think that's definitely in the works. And we're probably what 30, 40 minutes into this podcast. I definitely have an obscure sounding uh, vocal cords, to say the least. So maybe getting into some VO work, voiceover work. I think there's potential there. But yeah, I mean, right now, I think just kind of trusting the process and continuing to grind and, never closing a door. Always, you never know who you're going to meet in this business and who can vouch for you, who likes you. And, I mean, I guess next week, I do know what I'm doing next week. I'm about to be in Seattle, working an esports show for Riot Games, for about 3.5 weeks. So I'm going to be living in Seattle and, hanging out there and doing replays. And so again, you'll never know where broadcasting can take you. I've been all over the country for work, and there's other people who people who work the Super Bowl every year, people who work internationally, and that's just one of the joys. So we'll see, John. We'll see. The world is our oyster.
It's definitely one of those things where I've found myself doing stuff where you just never would have thought that you're doing that. And I'm even talking to some people about a one-off thing that I'm like, oh, well, that'll be a crazy event that is nothing that like exactly what I've ever done before, but at the same time, it's the exact same thing that I always do. It's just
Mm.
the content's different. Some of the setup is a little different, but otherwise, I'm like, oh, this is my standard. This is my normal. And I feel like you guys have that sort of thing going on with you as well. You tend to have like a good standard, a good normal, which
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think right with broadcasting and especially, with replay, it's definitely cyclical, right? Like, when it's the fall, you're going to be working football and basketball, but eventually the fall and the winter give way to spring and baseball happens. You also have soccer, right, in the summer. So you kind of get into these waves of, all right, when it's hot out, it's baseball. When it's cold out, it's football and basketball and maybe a little bit of hockey. And um, yeah, as a freelance broadcaster, you pick up different clients and, you know, again, you just never know. You could be doing this sport, that sport. You could be doing something you've never done before, and it's always fun. I think all of this like work diversity keeps it fresh, I think, right? Like you're not doing the same thing over and over and over. It's a little bit different each time. So yeah, we'll see, John. We'll see.
that's nice. Um, so I guess the other thing that I'd like to have you kind of touch base on is I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are coming up who would love to be working right there with you in Replay Row. Um, I also know that you tend to share information with people as well. So maybe talk about a little bit about the skills that you do, the things that you do on a regular basis that specifically like with operating like the machines and what the systems that you're more familiar with, that sort of thing.
Sure. So as a freelance replay op, one of the biggest pieces of advice I can offer is, you want to be as well versed in as many replay machines as possible. So for me personally, um, I know EVS, I know Dreamcatcher, 3Play, and Mira. And there's a few other ones out there as well, made by different broadcast production companies, but um, in terms of the job, right? Like with replay, I have shown up to gigs, John, where I get a full day rate and I've pressed 5 buttons. I've pressed 5 buttons.
Hmm.
I've been to a job where it was one of the hardest, I'm by myself with no replay producer and it's one of the most strenuous days ever. And the show is overnight at that where you're working, 12, 1, 2 in the morning. And I think, you know, part of the like that's being a replay operator. You never quite know what the job entails until you actually get there. But the basics, right? Like if a basket happens, if a touchdown happens, you're going to show replays of that. You know, when you're working a sporting event and you know Luka Doncic is going off for 30 points, you know, you're going to make a replay package. You're going to make a little highlight reel, maybe 3 or 4 plays of Luka Doncic, right? You know, it's like again, like just circling back, you know, having that kind of baseline background knowledge of sports and sports broadcasts is so integral to being a replay op because, you know, you've watched it a bunch of times growing up. You know what a broadcast looks like, so you can kind of anticipate, you know, what's coming. Another part of the replay, another part of the job of being a replay operator that I learned, you know, early on in my career was um, doing interviews, specifically time slipping interviews. And what I mean by that is almost every single interview that is on television during a sporting event, almost all of them, not quite all, but most of them, they're all delayed. They're all delayed by a minute or two. And I learned that, you know, working, you know, I worked the pre and post game show at Spectrum Sportsnet for a while, you know, and you get one of the coaches in the pregame show. It looks live, but it's not live. And learning how to use the replay box in that way is way different than using it to do highlights. Um, you know, where you have to, again, it's just like I'm trying to think of a good analogy. You know, it's just like, you know, it's kind it's almost like art, right? Like you can have a pencil or you can have a marker and you can draw one, you know, beautiful, perfect painting, and then on the other end, you can use the pen and you can make a Jackson Pollock bunch of dots, right? It's still art. It's still a marker, but you're using it in a completely different way. Um, so that would be one specific thing about the job that I had to learn. And again, just um, to answer your question, you know, you never really know what the job is going to entail until you get there. So you just have to be ready for anything.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that analogy that you came up with. I mean, it's the number of different things that you could do with that marker is ridiculous, and you don't know what that might be until you found yourself in the middle of it sometimes. And you also don't know, like one of the things I talk about a lot is there was the performance that we were doing, and they said, "Oh, the performer will be here," and then we were maybe 5 minutes away from it, and all of a sudden they said performers, and I said, "Oh, how many?" And they said 12, and I'm like, "Yeah, 12 is a lot different than one."
It might require a wider shot there from the cameras.
And maybe more than one microphone,
Yeah, maybe.
little things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's like you said, the interviews are recorded. It's one of the things that I've noticed too is like if you're doing something like that, then not only are you just playing it back, but you're tending to time it for the producer. You tend to have like an out cue even
Hmm.
sometimes as well, or you have to watch it to be like, hey, this guy does a really cool thing afterwards. And now I have to like tell them, hey, this guy at the end of this interview, like picks up his son and, you know, who is
God,
crucial for
God for
everything.
yeah, God forbid the athlete curses.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a whole different thing as
And
well.
you have to watch out for that too.
Yeah,
And they'll
yeah.
blame you for it. And
Hmm.
that's a fun little game to play. But
Yeah. You know, and you know, going back to, you know, you mentioned, you know, counting for the producer and, you know, you had an earlier question or kind of statement about, you know, when you're a replay op, you know, you're working with producers a lot. And eventually, after a while, you start thinking like a producer. You know how to count. You learn how to count. Um, and that is so important. I think that is so helpful. And the better you can get at counting and thinking like a producer, the better off you'll be. Um, you know, being a replay operator. Um, Yeah, can't stress that enough for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's part of that working collaboratively and creatively like that is producer usually has a really good vision. They usually have like these are the things that we're required to do. And it's kind of like, they have the cake and then like we add the frosting.
Sure.
It's always like, oh yeah, you have this great idea of everything you want to do and you took a really long time prepping it, but it doesn't look right. It doesn't quite it's not quite what it needs to be at this point. So we have to like add that little extra bit all the time. So and it's the thing that you guys hold everything together by being able to, you know, to show those things that happen. I mean, it's one of the things that I think about sometimes is like, what did we do? How did we exist before these things happened? You know, we just
Yeah,
went by the
catchy.
referees, or whoever swore they saw it one way is what
Yeah,
you got.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, a joke I always say, right, is like, well, before my job happened, the games were a hell of a lot quicker. Which, I don't know. I know, replay reviews and things like that can be a little difficult, for the viewer, for the fan, but at least the calls, tend to be mostly right. And I think the little background knowledge I have, I want to say EVS is specifically that machine. I think the original intention for that was to be used in hospitals. It was to assist doctors. Um, and then I think very quickly, the broadcast world was like, "Oh, we're gonna use this. This is huge. This can be helpful," and look where it's at now, right? And um, the Super Bowl recently just happened, and there's probably, I don't know, 20, 30, 25 replay ops, there's a myriad of replay boxes on those machines or sorry, there's a myriad of replay boxes on those broadcasts. And it's just crazy. Yeah. How did everything work prior to replay boxes? I'm not really sure. That's before my time, but I'm thankful to be working with them now. That's for sure. A replay op will you make your money when the action is happening because you have so many inputs. It's so fast paced. Timing is of the essence. And if you're not quick and on the ball, whether it's a play that could be challenged on the board or a crazy dunk that just happened on a truck broadcast, like if you're not ready to go and if you're not timely or quick, there's going to be some struggles. And again, like not saying there's like not a lot of prep work for replay up because trust me, there are shows where there is a ton of prep work, but you make your money when the game is live. 100%.
yeah, and I definitely think it's one of those things where you're having to focus so much, and that's part of like at one point in time I was saying I need to find a job where I don't need to be so eye focused.
Yeah, yeah.
As much as I was enjoying like the camaraderie of like a replay row situation,
hmm
I'm still sitting there going, I would have to pay more attention. Like,
Yeah, yeah. See,
I,
and
I, yeah,
like with that too, like being, a millennial with a short attention span or shorter attention span, it's like if I'm locked into a football game for 3.5 hours, dude, there's times where I'm driving home in complete silence because it's like I'm so hyper focused, like I have ADD or something. Like I'm just boom, beeline, focused, like not even thinking. And I'll drive home in silence, or I'll drive home and I'll put on the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, or I'll throw on like John Williams' greatest hits, and I'm just like, I gotta breathe right now. Like I need to relax because the strain of focusing can be so tedious sometimes. And yeah, man, it's tough.
yeah, that's one of the things that I've had a little bit of a struggle with too, especially like with like later games because there's no real place that you could go to kind of unwind other than like a bar or something where,
Hmm.
you transition from job to home.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the moment where, it's good to find something that's like, I had somebody who was putting out like a joke a day sort of thing. So I would literally park my car and spend 5 minutes transitioning mentally from, whatever the thing was that I was like the biggest concern of that day was that was on my mind, or even
Hmm.
sometimes it's the biggest joy because
Oh, totally.
you're wrapped up in, hey, this was the greatest moment that happened today, or this really impacted me in a really good positive way. And and then you have to go back to normal. You have to go back.
Yeah.
It's
And it,
time.
dude,
Yeah. Time to I gotta get my laundry ready for the morning.
yeah, right. Yeah, and I think that's, you know, getting back to normal, that's a good phrase because I think when you work in these environments, it's a high adrenaline, high testosterone environment, bright lights, it's loud, you feel the crowd, but yeah, like transitioning, when you go home at night can be difficult. And, at least for me personally, it's hard to turn my brain off sometimes. And, finding that thing, whatever it is, that's not quite like work related, where you can transition and can kind of wind down a little is so key. Like for me personally, um, I've been watching Batman, the animated series,
Hmm.
when I go home on Amazon Prime, from the 90s. And it's like, it's not sports related. It's not like a scripted show. It's a cartoon where I can like mentally decompress and I can just shut my brain off. You and me are huge fans of The Simpsons,
Right.
love The Simpsons. You know, I was raised by TV and we turned out TV. And, like watching a show kind of like that, can definitely be helpful.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
where your biggest concern is who's the man bat this time? You know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh my. But another thing that goes along with that hyper focus is you're also controlling the box that you're using to make everything work, which is almost like a remote control for a TV or a DVR. Um, but you're also cutting down clips and then like labeling them, and that's one of the things. Like occasionally, I'll fill in for a replay when they really are desperate, and from me having more of an editorial background where I was creating files that somebody else was editing, sometimes I would name things really well. And I know that a lot of the people that I've worked with, when I've done that, they're like, oh, I just do shorthand. I do like, goal, third goal this quarter or whatever.
Yeah,
And
so in that aspect, John,
mhm,
I learned this from mentors, right? I've learned it from Ken, learned it from Logan,
right.
older guys. So when the original EVS box came out, there was only, I believe, 10 characters that you had to label things. Only 10. When you meet like a really, you know, good seasoned replay op, their naming conventions are very short. That's partially the reason, but also, like we said earlier, timing is of the essence. Timing is critical in replay. So the faster you can label something, and live out and get back to gameplay and locking in on the game, the better off you'll be. And I'll work, truck shows and the lead op usually will make the naming convention. So let's say we were doing Villanova versus Creighton basketball. Well, we're going to write a V for Villanova. We're going to write a C for Creighton. And then what we're going to do is we're going to write the number of the player. And lastly, with the few characters you have left, you're just going to write whatever happened as quick as possible. So let's say number 2 on Villanova got a dunk. I'm just going to type V2 dunk. Number 10 on Creighton gets a three-pointer. I'm going to write C10 triple or C10 3PT. right? And that's how you kind of got to do it in order to, be fast and be quick and be sharp and be on the ball, and again, that just full circle loop of like, you got to be locked in, because Luka Doncic might get three triples in a row. He might get three three-pointers in a row. So if I write L77 triple all in order, that could get confusing. But, with the clip ID, because every clip you make is going to have a numerical ID as well, you'll know, oh, this is this one, this was that one, this happened before this one. And, um, you know, yeah, easy and quick naming conventions are very important.
Yeah, or when I was doing it, I was writing down time of like the score or whatever, more than like who is making the points because that's just the way my brain works. And
Yeah, yeah, and that's how like if you were editing on like Premiere or something, there's you get the time codes,
right,
so it's like that's also like that could be helpful as well for sure. Or even if you write, like like if it's a football game, there's a little less scoring, you could write like Rams TD first, that happened in the first quarter, something like that, right? Some sort of indication of when it happened.
yeah, and that's like I said, that's the sort of stuff that's like really crucial for you being able to pull it up later, or like if you're building a package for the player, then
Hmm, hmm.
okay, this was that one moment that was really great, and like the game I was working at last night, this player had made two really good moves, and they're like, "Hey, maybe we start a player package on this guy." And then right after that, he made a really big error, and they're like, "Well, there goes that package."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're like, because yeah, and that's also half the battle. Like, as a producer and even a replay up, you have to pick and choose your spots when you run your player packages. Like, you're not gonna, you could have a package of that player you were talking about, but you're not gonna run it right after he airballs. You might run it after a timeout or at a quarter break, or, he, he or she does something spectacular, and then it's like, all right, replay package on red, three, two, one, roll. Again, that's the ebbs and flows, right, of broadcasting, picking and choosing your spots.
So another thing that I'm thinking about because we're talking about being so focused is something that most other jobs don't have, which is there's no breaks.
Oh yeah.
There's no breaks. You have to basically you're locked in. You might get a halftime, you might not, depending on how things go. Um,
Mhm.
but that's where it's a good thing. Like if you have multiple people kind of in your replay row, you might be able to step away for a moment.
Yeah, use the restroom. Yeah. And
Right.
then and again, like that's where like, again, we're both, lucky and blessed and thankful to work in the entertainment broadcast space, but like on the other end of the stick, right? It's like I've been on shows, John. I've done esports where I've been live on a show for 7.5 hours. I'm having a PA hand me dinner, but I can't even eat it because, literally we're live. And, you know, that's part of the job sometimes, right? Like we talked about that earlier. Like you don't really know what the job entails until it actually happens, right? Like you could go to a football game that kicks off at 1 p.m., it goes to overtime, there's a million penalties, you're not getting out of there until 5:30 p.m., and that's where like the mental toll of being live and locked in for that long can be so strenuous. And that's why like, the big shows like Sunday Night Football and, you know, NBA Finals and the World Series, like those guys that are on those shows when they do their marathon games, right? Like recently, this past playoffs, there was an 18 inning World Series game and LCS game, the one where Freddie hit the walk-off in the 18th. And it's like, you're on air. You're on air for two games, two full games. That's insane. That's crazy. And, props to, everyone who's been through that. And, It's gosh, it can be a grind for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like one of the more interesting moments I had was I was stepping in as the last of I think five different people because I think it was Muhammad Ali's funeral they were covering, and it
Yeah.
just kept going, and the people kept coming in to fill in for somebody else, and everybody's like, "Oh, I have to go at this time."
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I was the late person and was able to sit there and go, "Okay, I can ride this out the rest of the way." I'm like,
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
stay here for another 4 hours." They were like really happy, and of course, the moment I sit down, I do like 10 minutes of it, and we're done. So, but
Hey, that's an important 10 minutes, John.
it kind of was because that LA traffic, that 10 minutes could be 5 hours.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about specifically, or would you just like to tell us some more about who you are in Replay Row?
Gosh. Well, I just want to say I'm thankful for being on your show and having this chat, this control room conversation. It's always nice to talk shop with you, John, and appreciate the platform you're giving and helping me shout out the row. Um, I don't think I have much else to say. Just, again, I would say maybe my summary, to pinpoint, it's just so important. It's so helpful when you're young, growing up in this industry to, have good soft skills, have good social skills, be someone that's nice to talk to, that's a pleasure to talk to, be friendly, because producers and teams and people are going to remember that more than maybe your physical or your tangible skills. You can be the best operator ever, but if you're not very nice, you might not get asked back. And again, I think just with Replay Row, trying to establish a culture of, you know, kindness and diversity and really being a positive uplifting force in this industry. I think that's kind of the goal. And we want to be approachable and kind, but also do good work. And yeah, that would be kind.
Well, that's definitely something that I would give you props for. Is you are always kind. You're always
Thank you,
putting
Sean.
yourself forward. You're always a little humble, but you do also make an impact with the talent that you bring, the level of professionalism, and the ways that you just amplify the role.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Where can people find Replay Row? Does it bring
So
them anywhere?
Replay Row, we have at Replay Row on Instagram. We have good tutorial videos on there, good little breakdown videos on there, just about anything and everything about replay. Um, we got a little YouTube channel going at I think it's official Replay Row. You'll see our logo, and yeah, that's all I got. Um, catch the row if you're watching sports or in the greater Los Angeles area. Chances are you're gonna have some Replay Row members, working on these big video screens, these big boards, at all the arenas. I think we officially have Replay Row members in every single arena and stadium in the greater Los Angeles area. So pumped. Love that. It takes all of us.
Definitely. Well, I really appreciate you being on my podcast, Tom, and sharing your thoughts and giving everybody a little bit of a taste of who you are as a person and a professional. So
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Anytime, anytime. I will be on your show, uh, anytime. Always a
I'm
pleasure.
sure I'll have you back for some more specific, detailed episodes that I have coming up. So,
Perfect. Sounds great.
all
Can't
right,
wait.
perfect. Thank you, sir.
No problem.